As a former Jehovah's Witness who grew up in the organization in the late 80s, early 90s, right up to 2001, it's quite interesting to look at jw.org, a phenomenon that didn't exist in my time, and read these articles which seem somewhat oversimplified. I seem to remember there being much more depth, much more meat to the articles back in the day, but I digress. I was looking at this recent article, What Has Happened to Decency? What Does the Bible Say? And it seems to be the same old, oh, look at the world, look how terrible it is out there, while at the same time describing things that do go on in the congregation itself. So let's read what this very slimmed down, very, I would say, third grade level article has to say. Decency is in decline. Rude patients yell at doctors. Disrespectful restaurant patrons berate servers. Unruly passengers assault flight attendants. Delinquent children mock, threaten and attack teachers. And some politicians get involved in scandalous conduct, while other politicians try to stress their own decency. Now I notice it's very clear that some decline in decency is missing from this list. During the time that I've been out of the organization, it's come to light that there is a lot of abuse going on in the organization that is covered up. I would call that delinquent behavior, indecent behavior, wouldn't you? And yet the organization quite famously continues to refuse to make any meaningful reforms to combat child abuse. And as we know, there is also spousal abuse that is rife in the organization. These things are not just sins, they're crimes. And what do? If there are no two witnesses to the crime or the sin, then they do nothing. And if there are, they gather a committee to play judge and juror without having any qualifications, hardly qualified to be investigating or sitting as judge and juror in situations that could mean ongoing danger for children, for women, even men. But let's go on. The Bible is a reliable guide for what constitutes decent behavior. It also explains why there is a lack of decency today. What has happened to decency? The decline in decency, behavior that is good, moral, and acceptable, is being seen around the world. And this is such a typical setup for whatever it is the Watchtower has to say, to make it seem like we're living in a particularly immoral time in history. Well, we all know about the times of Sodom and Gomorrah and the times of Noah and countless other times in the Bible. But no, those were nothing compared to today. Always seems to be this feeling of impending doom that I remember feeling. Things are so bad. The end must be near, right? Well, they go on to say, according to a recent Gallup poll, Americans rated the state of moral values in the United States to be lower now than any other time in the past 22 years. In another survey of more than 32,000 respondents in 28 countries, 65% said that the lack of basic human decency today is the worst they have ever seen. The Bible predicted the behavior that we see today. There will be difficult times in the last days. People will be selfish, greedy, boastful, and conceited. They will be insulting, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unkind, and violent. And there's these ellipses, which I remember being all over the literature. They skip over bits. And it's kind of rare to find people that go back and read the entire verse, read the entire chapter, or even the entire book, and look at it critically. So let's see what exactly they missed. So we went into the New World Translation itself. But know this, that in the last days, critical times hard to deal with will be here. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, haughty, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, disloyal, having no natural affection, not open to any agreement, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, without love of goodness, betrayers, headstrong, puffed up with pride, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having an appearance of godliness but proving false to its power, and from these turn away. An appearance of godliness is actually something that I think is somewhat of a dig to the society's own members. I remember once, many times rather, taking it as a dig at me. It's that constant guilty conscience you have, that constant feeling of not doing enough. You know, if you have friends that aren't witnesses, you're leading a double life. if your thoughts aren't in alignment with the strict rules put out in the society's literature when it comes to not just immorality, as they call it, with other consenting adults, but also in your own home with your partner, your married partner, or by yourself. I mean, we all know for you to follow the society's guidelines 100%, I would say is almost impossible if you're quite honest with yourself. So having an appearance of godliness but proving false to its power, I'd say many witnesses fall under that. How about verse 3, having no natural affection? When we talk about natural affection, I think about affection between family members, for example, parent to child, child to parent. How many parents have been separated from their children who've been disfellowshipped or disassociated themselves? These days I hear you can be disassociated without yourself choosing to disassociate. I guess that's a measure they use if you happen to take a blood transfusion and are not repentant, as they say. Or rather, if you take the wrong blood fractions, it's also complicated these days. But either way, disfellowshipped or disassociated, you're separated from your family, and as a witness, you're supposed to pretend that they're dead. No natural affection. I would say that's a sign of something within the society that shows that decency is in decline. If you as a parent don't love your child unconditionally, and just because they choose not to follow a religion, or happen to make a mistake such as perhaps fornication, as they call it, all consenting, no one's harmed, and yet that's it, they're dead to you. The reactions are very disproportional, and I personally couldn't see a situation where I could let anyone tell me to never speak to my child again. But then again, if we think about it, this is a process that takes place over a very long time. I saw a video of one of the governing body members calling children enemies of God. We all remember the words from the podium, spare the rod, spoil the child, that scripture. Corporal punishment has always been an acceptable form of so-called discipline. With time, you slowly come to see that you must have a greater loyalty to the organization than to your own child. And what happens to children that are raised in this environment? Well, if they want to be good Jehovah's Witnesses, they should also be ready to see their parents as dead if they should choose to leave the organization. Again, having no natural affection. What about slanderers? Well, we all know how rife gossip is among the congregations. How women, especially single mothers, are looked down upon. How a young person seen talking to or walking with a member of the opposite sex can have rumors running rampant in the congregation. And if you're marked as bad association, if you're reproved or disfellowshipped, there is no end to the slander and the gossip that takes place. It almost seems to be a necessary part of being a witness, that it somehow makes you feel better about your own spirituality to put other people down. Even those that aren't baptized can be looked down upon as bad association or spiritually weak. Yes, the Bible did predict behaviors that we see today, as this Watchtower article says. What it neglects to mention is that these behaviors are rampant within the organization as well, not just in the so-called wicked world. The article goes on to say, in a world where decency is in decline, millions have found the Bible to be an excellent guide to good behavior. Its moral advice is always reliable now and forever, according to Psalm 111 verse 8. Consider a few examples. What the Bible says, all things that you want men to do to you, you must also do to them, according to Matthew, meaning we should treat others kindly and respectfully just as we want to be treated. Apparently, the governing body thinks that there's an exception to this particular verse, because you're not supposed to treat disfellowship members or members who've disassociated kindly or with respect, even if they're your own family members. But I digress. They go on to name Ephesians 4:25, now that you have put away deceit, each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, meaning we should be honest in all that we say and do. Is this written for kindergarten children? I don't remember the Watchtower article sounding like this. Well, once again, they neglect to mention the lies that are told, on video no less, in the courts, such as in Canada, where the Watchtower Society claimed that family members do not shun one another, that family relations continue as normal, even when one is disfellowshipped. That's an outright lie. Or when the governing body member, Jeffrey Jackson, was at the Australian Royal Commission and claimed not to know about the inner workings of judicial committees regarding child sexual abuse. Well, it would seem that if we truly read this article with an open mind, Jehovah's Witnesses themselves are a part of the problem when they ask, what has happened to decency? But the subliminal message is, look at them out there in the wicked world. We're not like them. We should stay away from them. In the grander scheme of things, you see clearly that this is a cult mentality, glossing over their own failings and focusing on those of others in order to keep people trapped in the cult, at least mentally. Very subtle, very subliminal, and yet effective. Part of the constant drip effect. And what the readers within the organization will fail to reflect on is that yes, while the things mentioned in this article and in the scriptures do occur, even in the world, let's just forget about the fact that they occur within the organization. The fact is, there are also things that are the opposite that happen in the world. I'm thinking about the picture in this article where you see a woman who I assume is supposed to be a witness, that's the subliminal message, helping an older woman by giving her seat on the bus. I see this happen every single day. And they're not witnesses that are giving up their seats for older persons, and especially as this person appears to be not just older but disabled. I would say that's just the bare minimum and has nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witnesses being the true religion or not. In fact, if anything, shunning your own family members, for example your children that you have a duty to love and protect, cutting them off from the social networks, I would say that's much worse than someone not giving up their seat on a bus. But it's just another day in a cult. Nothing particularly harmful, really, in this article. It's just part of a bigger picture. One where non-witnesses are demonized, and where this constant feeling of impending doom is strengthened. And really, it becomes very clear when you're outside the cult. I've been out of it for over 2 decades now, and had I read this article back when I was in the organization, I probably would not have reacted to any part of it. It would have just been part of going through the motions. I would have underlined it, put up my hand in the congregation, and tried to give as good an answer as possible, following the words in the article. Not ever questioning how the message was part of a bigger push to further isolate me from the outside world that I was supposed to see as wicked. Thanks for reading this article with me today. Have a nice rest of your day. Goodbye. Hear me out.